And I'm like, well, this will be an awesome opportunity just to share this with you this morning. Now, this is going to be a very famous passage. You guys, if you grew up in church or you grew up around Sunday school, I have no doubt you have heard of this story that we're going to cover today. There have been songs written about this. There have been scenes from movies about this story that we're going to talk about today. In fact, even if you didn't grow up in church and you're kind of new to this, I'm willing to bet you've probably heard this at least once in your life. And the story we're going to be talking about is the story of the woman at the well. One of my all-time favorite passages from the Bible, and we're going to land in John chapter 4. So if you got your Bibles, go ahead and flip over to John chapter 4. We'll get there in a second. But here's what I love about this passage so much. The first thing is this. I have read this story, I can't tell you how many times. I have read this countless times. I have probably done a deep dive study of this particular passage at least a dozen or plus times. I really have. And every single time I do that, I come away with something different. Like there's always something rich and new that I pull from this story, and that's one of the things I love about it. The other thing I love about this passage is it's just so relatable to us. Like, no matter where you are on your spiritual journey, if you've been walking with Christ for 40 years, you can get something from this story. If you're a baby Christian and you're just kind of starting out, like, you can get something from this story. Or maybe someone drug you here and you're not even a Christian, you're not even fully bought into this whole Christian thing yet. You can get something from this story. So I think it's just a great story and it's really timely. Now, I will say this. I got like 40 verses to cover here. So you can't interrupt me and you can't distract me, okay? Because we got to get through this, and I realize I'm the only thing standing between you and food this afternoon. So just got to hang with me. We're gonna fly this plane at like the 10,000-foot level, and every so often when there's a point that I think is particularly relevant for us, we're going to just parachute in on it, and then we're going to go right back, and we're just going to kind of keep going, okay? So we're in this together. We're going to get through it, okay? So let's go ahead and jump in because we don't have a lot of time. We're going to pick up the story in John chapter 4, starting in verse 3. Verse 3 says this. It says, it's talking about Jesus here. It says, he left Judea and departed again for Galilee, and he had to pass through Samaria. I want you to underline that phrase, had to. Because see, here's my problem with that verse. No, Jesus didn't had to go to Samaria. That's not what's happening here. He didn't had to go. See, For those that are not familiar with the region, you got Judea, which is down here in the south. That's where Jesus and his disciples are. And they're going up here to Galilee, which is way up here in the north. And they're going to walk there. And then right in the middle of these two regions is another little region called Samaria. And when you look at it on a map, you're like, well, yeah, Michael, that checks out. You know, a straight line, you go from Judea straight to Galilee, you have to go through Samaria. That just makes sense. Except what's hidden here in the context of this passage is what we don't see is that there's 800 years of animosity and tension and hatred built up between these two groups of people, the Jews and the Samaritans. And we don't have time to unpack all of that, but it goes all the way back to the days of King Solomon. When King Solomon died and the kingdom split into two kingdoms, you had Judah in the south and you had the northern kingdom of Israel to the north. A lot of the ethnic Jews that were in the north began to intermarry with people outside of the faith. They began to marry with people from the Babylonian Empire, from all of the other nations around them. And then what happens is, you had a good Jewish man, and he would marry this Babylonian woman who had pagan gods, and they would get married, and they would have like this little religion baby. And what would happen is they would take a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and they would smush it together. And we call that syncretism. There's a word for it. It's called syncretism. It's when you take a little bit of this religion, a little bit of this religion, and you mash them together, and you make up your own new religion. And so what was happening is the ethnic Jews were they essentially took a pair of scissors to the Old Testament, and they cut away everything but the Torah, everything but the first 5 books. So you had the first 5 books of the Bible, that's all they held to. But then they started kind of like reverse engineering those first 5 books, and they would actually cut out some of the passages of the Torah that they didn't like. And so the Jews would see them, and they're like, they have betrayed the one true God. And so they didn't want anything to do with them. And then the Samaritans, who still in some way considered themselves Jewish, would look at the Jews and was like, well, forget you, man. If you don't want anything to do with us, we don't want anything to do with you. So we're just going to go up here into the north, and we're going to build our own temple, and we're going to have our own holy city, and we're going to do our own thing. And so for 800 years, you had these two groups just going at it with each other. The Samaritans hated the Jews, and the Jews hated the Samaritans. I can't underscore that enough. The Jews hated the Samaritans so much that they actually built a bypass in for their travelers. So if you were down south in Judea and you were going to go up to Galilee, what they would do is you would get to a certain point and they essentially had an exit ramp for you. You could hop off on the exit ramp and you could take the bypass all the way around Samaria and then end up in Galilee. And the reason they did that is because they don't even want their Jewish travelers to have to put their sandals on Samaritan soil. Like, you don't understand. Like, these people hated each other. And when I say that, you got to understand, this is not like we're here in Camden, we're going to take a trip down to Sumter this afternoon, and we're going to start heading down towards 521, and all of a sudden we get a call that there's a wreck maybe around Rembert. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off in Boykin and hit 261 and keep going south until I hit 378, and then cut over, and I'm all good. That's not how this worked. But you got to understand, it was a 3-day walk just to get from Judea through Samaria if you took a straight line. 3 days walking through the desert. Now, if you took the exit ramp and you took the bypass around, it was a 6-day trip. 6 days. You were adding 3 additional days of walking to your trip. Imagine this. You got to really hate somebody if you're going to add 3 additional days of walking through the desert just to avoid coming into contact with these people. But that's what's happening here. And here's the deal. Everything about this culture in this time was pointing Jesus to the bypass. Every single thing that was happening when he was traveling, because he would go back and forth all the time, everything, culturally, religiously, politically, ethnically, everything pointed Jesus to hopping on the bypass and avoiding Samaria altogether. Because remember, he's a Jewish rabbi. It wouldn't have been, not only was it okay for him to take the bypass, it actually would have been expected of him to avoid the Samaritans and to take this bypass. So why did Jesus had to? Why did Jesus had to go through Samaria? Well, it's because Jesus had a divine appointment in Samaria. See, John 6:38, Jesus actually tells us that I did not come to do my will, but do the will of the one who sent me. See, it was the Heavenly Father that sent Jesus on this trajectory, on this path. He had a divine appointment in Samaria. It was God the Father that put Jesus on this path to go to Samaria. It was God the Father who put Jesus on this path to cross paths with this woman at the well that we're going to get to here in just a little bit. So yeah, when we say Jesus had to go to Samaria, yeah, he actually did. He had to go because he had a divine appointment there. Now here's the question we have to wrestle with this morning for ourselves. What's the thing that you had to do? What's the thing that you have to do? Like, what's the thing that God is calling you into for you to do? I'm not saying we're actually going to do it, but like, what's the thing that God's calling you to do? I mean, we know what the Bible says about forgiveness, right? The Bible tells us that we forgive because he has forgiven us. And we're supposed to forgive others that offend us, that betray us, that turn on us. And there's that person in your life that you know God is calling you to forgive that person. Have you started the path of reconciliation with that person? What about that mission trip? Like God's just tugging on your heart. And he's like, I want you to go on this mission trip next year. You need to go. And you keep coming up with all these reasons. Man, it's just not the right time. I'm not in the right position. I need to keep kicking that can down the road. I don't have the money. But you just keep making excuse after excuse. Why aren't you going on this mission trip? Or what about even locally here, being on a serve team? You're like, man, I really like all this. God's calling me to step in and find purpose and be part of a serve team here at the church. But man, I'm just a little intimidated because I don't know the people that well, and I'm trying to figure out where I fit in. Where is he calling you to do? So you're just not going to step into that. Or maybe it's he's calling you to share your faith. Maybe he's calling you to speak to a loved one, a friend, a family member, a coworker, somebody like that, who you just know God's laying it on your heart to share your faith with that person, but you're like, man, that's going to be an awkward conversation. So I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to hold back. See, the thing we got to realize this morning is that there will always be exit ramps for the things that God calls us to do. There will always be bypasses around the things that God has laid in our life, that he has planned for our lives. So the question we have to wrestle with this morning is, are you allowing God to strategically place you where he wants to? Not where you want to be, but are you allowing God to place you where he needs you and where he wants you? So let's keep going. Jesus is going to end up in this little town called Sychar. It's just this small little speck of a town. At this point, he's been traveling for several days with his disciples. We learn from the text that it's hot. It says in the text that this happens in the 6th hour. The way the Jewish culture measured time was they started at sunup. So sunup was right about 6 in the morning, and so the 6th hour would put them about noon in the middle of the day, which is the hottest part of the day. But also we know from the text that he was hungry. The disciples at some point, they leave Jesus there and they go to the next town over to go try to find some food for Jesus and them. Apparently there wasn't a Publix in Sychar, so they were going to the next town over to get some pub subs for everybody to eat. But we see Jesus here in this story, and he's exhausted. He's been walking for days. He's hot. He's grimy. He's tired. He's hungry. And at this point, all he wants to do is find a place to rest. That's all he wants to do is find a place for a minute, just to sit and rest. But of all the places he could rest, he's going to sit in a place that, quite frankly, he should not have been sitting based on the culture. And he's going to have a conversation in just a second with a woman that, quite frankly, he should not have been talking to. So let's keep going in verse 7. So in verse 7, the woman shows up, and she's there to draw water from the well. She came to get some water, and Jesus is not going to waste any time. He's going to start a conversation with her, and he said, hey, can you give me a drink? Can you give me a drink of water? And this is the beginning of a conversation that never should have taken place. This is a conversation that in the beginning had 3 strikes against us. First, she was a Samaritan woman, he was a Jew. I've already talked about the history of them. That should not have happened. A Samaritan should not have been having a conversation with a Jew. A Jew should not be talking to a Samaritan. Second thing is she's a woman. In that culture, in that day, in that time, men did not talk directly with women. It was actually a divorceable offense if you were a married woman to have a conversation with another male on your own directly. So they should not have happened. She was a Samaritan. She was a woman. And this woman had a past. We're going to see that unfold here in a little bit, but you got to understand this woman had a past. She had some things in her life that brought about some guilt and some shame. The fact that she is drawing water at the well in the middle of the day, at the hottest part of the day, tells us that she was trying to avoid people. See, the way it worked back then was the women and the children would get up at first light of day, and then they would get their buckets and they would go to the well because nobody had running water in their house, right? There was no indoor plumbing, so they would go, they'd fill their buckets up at the well, and then all the people would be doing the same thing. All the ladies, all the kids would be there doing the same thing. And you just lug all your water back to your house, and that was your water supply for the day. But she doesn't do that. She chooses the hottest part of the day to go do this. Why? Because she's trying to avoid people. Because these people are the same ones that are bringing condemnation and judging her for her life, the things that she's doing. And yet, here's Jesus. He's pushing past all of these barriers. He's going to push past all of these things that culturally, that the world's telling him, do not have a conversation with this woman. And he's going to pursue a conversation with her. And society may have shamed this woman, but Jesus didn't. Culture may have dismissed her, but Jesus did not. So he's going to pursue this conversation with her in this moment. And I don't know if you realize this, but that's really good news for us this morning. Because if Jesus will seek out an outcast of society, the worst of the worst culturally kind of person, and have a conversation with them, pursue a relationship with them, that means if he walked through these doors today, he would have a conversation with any one of us. He would find the worst of the worst here in this room and have a conversation. I don't know if you realize that, but somebody in this room is the worst person in this room. It's just mathematics, right? If somebody in here is the worst person in this room, it quite possibly could be the person talking to you right now. But the reality is, my point is, that Jesus is willing to meet you right where you are. He's willing to meet you right where you are in that moment. He's not saying, hey, I'm waiting for you to show me some future cleaned up version of yourself. I'm not wanting some time when you figured out life and you kind of get your feet under and you figured it out. That's not what I want. Jesus is like, I will meet you right where you are with all your baggage, with all of your junk, with everything that you bring, all of the guilt and shame. I will meet you there. See, this is huge for us this morning because the reality is, for some of us, we have a perception of God that he's somehow angry with us. Like some of us have this perception that God is maybe disappointed in us. Or maybe God is, should I say, disgusted by the things that we're doing. And here's the thing, if that's your attitude towards God, you will never go to God for help. If you think that God is angry with you, he's disappointed in you, he's upset with you, you will never take your burdens to him. And God is the only one that can help us. But that's not what he's doing. He is there. He loves us. Now this woman, okay, let's get back to the story. This woman, she gets it, okay? She understands that this is culturally not a conversation that it should be having. This is not a conversation culturally that is inappropriate. This should not be happening. So she's going to say in verse 9, she says, how is it that a Jew asks for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? And I love that John adds this side note. He says, for Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. So Jesus is going to answer. Verse 10, he says, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. Jesus essentially is saying, if you knew me, if you actually knew who I was, if you knew who it was that was talking to you right now, you'd be asking me for a drink. And what I would do is I would give you living water. I want you to underline that phrase, living water, in your Bibles. Because see, what Jesus is doing here, this is vintage Jesus. Jesus does this all the time. He takes a physical representation of something and he points it towards a spiritual reality. Because essentially what he's doing is he's introducing her to the gospel. He's introducing her to the good news that he is there to bring forward. When he's talking about this living water, he's talking about salvation that he is offering her. But she's not quite there yet. This woman's she's not fully bought into what he's saying. So she says to him, she says, sir, you have nothing to draw water with, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? In other words, like, Jesus, you don't even have a bucket, man. How are you supposed to draw water? You don't even have a bucket to draw water with. And oh, by the way, this living water well that you're talking about, where's the well? Because I've got my well right here. Where's this living water well you're talking about? And so Jesus is going to explain it to her. He's going to respond to her. He says this. He says, Jesus said to her, everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. Let me back up a second. I skipped a part. What she's going to say is she's literally going to defend the well that she is drawing from. In verse 12, she says, are you greater than our father Jacob? He gave us this well and drank from it himself, as did the sons and his livestock. In other words, this well was good enough for Jacob. It's good enough for my ancestors. It's good enough for me. Why is this well that you're talking about with living water so good? Why should I abandon the well that I'm drinking from for this well that you're talking about? And then Jesus is going to explain it to her. He says this. He says, everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life. In other words, Jesus is saying, look, you got it all wrong, man. You're misunderstanding what I'm saying. It's not about the bucket. It's not about the bucket that you're carrying. It's about the well that you're drawing from. It's about the well that you're trying to drink from. He's going to say, essentially, he's like, look, because here's the thing. You can continue to try to source yourself from other places, but if that source that you're drawing from can't provide you the thing that you're looking for, then you're going to live a life of dissatisfaction. You're going to be dissatisfied the rest of your life. He says it doesn't matter what bucket you're trying to use. The bucket's not what matters. Now, what he is pointing out here is what most of us do. Because let's be honest, most of us, we're all about the bucket, right? We're all about the bucket that we have for our lives. And we go through life with our bucket, and we look at our bucket, and it's like, okay, I'm comfortable with this bucket, but man, this bucket's kind of boring. It's not special. There's nothing special about this bucket. Like it doesn't bring me the satisfaction that I think I want. It doesn't bring me the joy or the peace, the satisfaction in my life. It doesn't bring me freedom. So what I really need to do is I need to find me another bucket, because I need to find me another job. I need to find me another paycheck. I need to find me another house. I need to find me another neighborhood, another set of friends. What I really need is another life. I just need a different bucket, because that bucket's not doing it for me anymore. And so what we do is we start reaching out for other buckets when we're not satisfied. I'll give you an example. So then we go to this bucket, right? So we say, okay, I need a bigger bucket. That's what I need. That bucket's bigger. I need a bigger house. I need a bigger car. I need a bigger garage. Yeah, I need a 4-car garage. I don't care if I only have 2 cars. I need a 4-car garage. I need that extra bedroom, that extra half bath. Oh yeah, I need a truck. I know I got a 1500 series. I need that Duramax. That's the truck I need. I need the big one, the one that can tow everything. I don't care if it doesn't ever touch dirt. It just is a commuter vehicle. I need a bigger truck. I just need something bigger. And then what we realize is that doesn't satisfy us either. We don't get joy out of that bucket either, right? So you know what we do then? We're like, okay, I'm going to go smaller. Bigger didn't work. I'm going to go the opposite of that. I'm going to go smaller. I'm going to minimize my life. I'm going to streamline everything. I'm going to cut out all of the excess, the stuff I don't need. I'm just going to sync up my life. I'm going to gut my schedule. I'm going to take out all the frills, the things that distract me, all those relationships. I'm just going to go smaller. I'm going to read all those books on minimalists, all those books that those weird people write, and I'm going to minimize my life. But then you realize that doesn't satisfy you either. Going smaller doesn't streamline your life either, right? So what do? We got to get another bucket. So then, let's go with this bucket. Yeah, I'm going to clean myself up. Yeah, I'm gonna do all the right things. I'm going to stop doing those bad habits and those bad things. I'm just going to do the right things. I'm going to white knuckle my way through life. And then you get tired. You can't maintain that because you're trying to do it on your own. And that doesn't bring you satisfaction. That doesn't bring you joy. So what do? You just go for another bucket. Yeah, okay, I know what I'll do. Okay, I got this bucket. Now this bucket, it looks a little older, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pretty it up, right? I'm going to put some hearts on it. Yeah. I'm going to put some flowers on it. That's cool. Yeah, we like that. Yeah. We're going to make that bucket look pretty. We're going to tan that bucket up. We're going to nip it. We're going to tuck it. We're going to Botox it. We're going to do everything we can to make that bucket look a little younger, like the old version of myself. And then you realize that bucket doesn't satisfy you either. And see, what Jesus is saying here to this woman is you can go bucket after bucket after bucket, but it's not about the bucket. And what he's saying to this woman and what he's saying to us is it doesn't matter what bucket you have. Are you drinking from the right well? You have to drink from the right well. So the question we have to ask ourselves this morning is, are you drinking from the right well, people? So he's going to keep going, okay? So he's explained this to her, and she's all in. At this point in the story, she gets it. She's all in. She's convinced. She likes what he's saying. She says, "Sir, give me this water so that I will never be thirsty again, that I can come here and draw water." She's like, "Sign me up, Jesus. Sign me up. I want this." Now, I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm like a professional Christian. Like, this is what I do for a living, right? I'm a professional Christian. And let me just say this. In my world, when you get someone and you're sharing the faith and sharing the gospel with them, when you get them to the point that they're like, "Sign me up. Sign me up," that's exactly the response you hope to get from them. That's the response you want from them, is like, "Sign me up. Okay, let's do this." And here's what you got to do. When you're in that moment and you get someone that's like, "Sign me up," here's what you got to close the deal. You got to close the deal right then, right there. You don't kick this can down the road. You don't say, "Okay, we'll come back in a week and we can talk about it." No, you got to close the deal right then. And so if I'm Jesus's coach in this situation, let's just pretend that for a second. Like, I'm Jesus's coach. Here's what I'm going to tell Jesus. Like, "Okay, Jesus, you got her right where you want her, man. Now you got to close the deal. You got to get her to bow her head. You got to get her to receive you into her heart. We'll take it from there. We'll get her signed up for a baptism. We'll get her into a life group. We'll get her hooked up with our Women of Life ministry. We'll get her into a discipleship program. We'll take care of all that. You just got to get her to that point, Jesus." But that's not what Jesus does. Notice what he says. He says, "Go get your husband. Go get your husband." And for us, I'm like, again, okay, let me be Jesus' coach here for a minute. I'm like, I'm going to step in. I'm going to be like, "Time out, Jesus." Like, okay, I get it. You're the Son of God. You're second person of the Trinity. You're God incarnate and all that. I understand that. But you're messing it up. You're doing it wrong, Jesus. You know her past relationships are a sensitive subject in her life. Don't bring that up right now. Let's just get her into the family, and then we can help deal with all that other stuff. But that's not what Jesus does. Again, he says, "Go get your husband." And I think it's hilarious the way she responds to him. She's like, she tries to outmaneuver Jesus with her response. She says, "I have no husband." And Jesus is going to be like, "You're right. Actually, you've had 5 husbands. You've had 5 husbands, and the dude you're shacking up with right now ain't even your husband." So he calls her out for this thing. And here's why. Here's why I think Jesus calls her out for this. Because to be fully loved by Jesus, we must be fully known by him as well. You cannot hide part of yourself from Jesus. If you expect to be fully loved by him, you cannot be partly known. You have to know he has to know the whole story. He has to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. See, we have this tendency, we want to put fake you up front so everybody can see that. We put that Instagram us up front. And Jesus is like, look, fake you is doing just fine. Instagram you, man, you're crushing it. You're killing it, no problem. But that's not enough. Because you see, to be partially known is to be unknown. And you cannot be fully loved by God if you are not fully known by Him as well. And see, there are a lot of people in today's time who are walking around with this facade up. They want to let everybody think that they got their act together. They are in control. They know exactly what's going on. Their life is awesome. They don't need any of this stuff. But secretly, they're falling apart inside. Secretly, they've got this thing in them that is just weighing down on them, that's crushing them. And what we do is we want to kind of keep that stuff tucked away. We don't want to share that with the world. Definitely don't want to share that with Jesus. And what Jesus is saying here is, I want you to go get that thing. I want you to go get that thing that brings the most amount of shame in your life. I want you to go get that thing that brings the most amount of condemnation in your life. The thing that you are constantly being judged for. The thing that brings the most guilt in your life. That thing that makes you show up at noon to draw water rather than doing it at the normal time. I want you to go get that thing, and I want you to drag it out of the darkness. I want you to drag it into the light. Because Jesus says, I'm not ashamed of you. I'm not judging you for that. And the enemy's there. He's going to whisper in your ear. He's got these little whispers. He's going to say, yeah, I get it. Jesus died for a lot of sins, but that's a pretty ugly one, man. He didn't die for that one. So you better keep that one hidden. You better keep that one kind of tucked away. And Jesus is like, no. In fact, the reason I went to the cross was for that sin. The reason I died on the cross was for that very sin right there. So let me ask you this. The question we have to wrestle with this morning is, what's your thing? What's your baggage? What's the thing that you're trying to keep from Jesus? What's the thing that you're most embarrassed about? What's the thing you're trying to keep hidden in the dark? Because Jesus, He wants you to bring that thing out of the darkness and into the light, because He wants to fight it on your behalf. But here's the thing. If you continue to try to fight that thing by yourself in the dark, you're going to lose that fight every single time, because the darkness is the enemy's domain, and he will kick your butt in the darkness by himself. So what we have to do is, and what Jesus is telling this woman is, we have to take that thing and drag it into the light so that He can fight on our behalf. See, Jesus doesn't just want the polished up pieces that we put on display. He wants it all. The good, the bad, and the ugly. But you can't let that happen in the dark. It's not going to happen in the dark. So she keeps going. Verse 19. The woman said, Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. You think? Dude just read your mail in front of the world. But now she's going to do exactly in this moment what we all do. She's going to deflect. That's what we all do. Like when Jesus starts getting close to the heart, like when He starts like piercing into the heart a little bit, like that makes us uncomfortable. When Jesus starts getting to some real wounds in our life and some real pain, like we all want to deflect. We all want to push away and change the subject to something else. And that's what she's going to do here. The lady's going to do that. She says, our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you say that in Jerusalem is the place where people ought to worship. She's like, okay, hold up, Jesus. I hear you, but can we talk about something else? Can we talk about something that has absolutely nothing to do with me or this conversation we're having? I want to change the subject. And Jesus doesn't let her off the hook, though. I love that. He comes back at her, and he gives her this quick response. He's like, no, you're wrong. I'm right. Let's move on. And then in verse 23, he says, but the hour is coming and is now here when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship Him. I want you to circle those phrases, true worshipers and such people, and then draw a connecting line to those. Because what Jesus is saying is God is not searching for worship. He wants worshipers. He wants people who will bring their praise. He wants people who will bring their worship to Him. And He's going to go on. In verse 24, He says, God is spirit, and those who worship Him must worship in spirit and truth. In other words, when He says you worship in spirit, He's saying you got to worship with your whole heart. You can't hold anything back. You got to come at God with just a passion and a genuine love for Him with everything you have. Don't hold back. But He also says worship in truth. In other words, your worship has to be grounded in truth. It has to be grounded in His word. Because you cannot rightly love God if you don't have a right understanding of who God is. So we have to bring our worship to God. We have to bring our whole worship, our whole heart, and it has to be rooted in truth. And now, again, she's a little uncomfortable. She's going to push back a little bit. She says, I know that Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things. And I love Jesus' response to her here. I love what he says. He says, Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am he. Now, for you Bible nerds in the room, that should put chills down your spine. When you hear the words of Jesus in this moment, let me explain what's going on. Multiple times, 7 times in the book of John, in the Gospel of John, Jesus makes these I am statements. 7 is the number of completion, and he makes these statements like, I am the bread of life, I am the resurrection and the life, I am the good shepherd. 7 times he's going to say these I am statements. But the thing is, I am is the covenant name of God in the Old Testament. See, what happened in the Old Testament, if you go all the way back to, there was a conversation between God and Moses. And God is telling Moses, look, I want to send you into Egypt. You're going to go see Pharaoh, and you're going to tell him, let my people go. You need to free my people, because all of the Hebrew people were enslaved in Egypt at the time. And Moses is a little intimidated, and Moses is like, okay, God, but like, who do I even tell him sent me? And God looks at him and says, you tell him that I am sent you. I am is the name of God in the Old Testament. In the Hebrew, it literally translates into the word Yahweh. And when Jesus is standing in front of this woman, he's essentially saying, when he says, I who speak to you am he, what he's actually saying is that Yahweh, the great I am, the God of the universe, is here and is pursuing you in this moment. So she runs back, man. This is cool. She runs back to town to tell everybody where everybody's at in town, and she's so excited she actually leaves her bucket. Not like she needs it anymore, right? She just ditches her bucket and heads back to town. And here's what she says. She says, come see a man who told me all that I ever did. Can this be the Christ? And don't miss what Jesus just did here. He takes this woman and he reaches in and he grabs that thing that brings about all of the condemnation in her life, all of the guilt, all of the shame, and he removes it. He removes her shame and her guilt. And the very first thing she does, she takes off to go share her story. She goes to share her story with everyone around her because, see, here's the thing. When you experience Jesus like this, when Jesus removes the guilt and shame from your life, man, it changes you. It does. It changes you from the inside out. And what we see in the text is the text that many people came out to see Jesus because of her testimony. Because of what she told them, they began to believe into who Jesus was as well. And look, you got to understand, this woman, her life was a flaming hot dumpster fire of a mess. But God found a way to use her mess to reach other people. And that's the power of testimony. That's the value of us sharing with just one more person our story of how we came to know Jesus. See, you have no idea what hangs in the balance every single time we step out in obedience and we just do the thing that God's called us to do. You have no idea the part that we will play in God's greater plan when we just share our story with one more person. So the question is, who needs to hear your story? If you're a Christ follower, who is God calling you to share? That one more person, just that one person. You have no idea the ripple effect that happens when we simply share our story with one person. And you have no idea what hangs in the balance when we are faithfully obedient to him. And so the story is going to wrap up today. It's Jesus, he decides, he's like, okay, we're just going to hang out here for a little bit. He's going to stay in Sychar for a few days, and he's going to meet with the people, and he's going to share and preach to them and talk to them as well. But the text tells us that the townspeople actually began to experience Jesus for themselves. It was no longer based on a testimony that they had heard. They actually experienced Jesus for themselves. They came to know the risen Savior for themselves. And you got to understand, like, all of this happened from a nothing nobody whose life was forever changed by a chance encounter at a well. It all started in a place that, quite frankly, Jesus never should have been. Having a conversation with someone he never should have been speaking to. So if you're here this morning, here's what you got to ask yourself. If you're a Christ follower, if you're on Team Jesus, this is Team Day. If you're on Team Jesus, what is it that God's calling you to do? Where is it that God's calling you to place your feet? Not necessarily where you maybe are comfortable, because oftentimes the thing that Jesus is going to call you to is going to make you uncomfortable. That's how you grow. But where is it that Jesus is calling you to step into? What is that thing that he is calling you to do? Are you going to do that, or are you going to take the exit ramp and take the bypass around the thing that he's calling you to do? But I can tell you, if you do that, you're never going to grow in your relationship with him. You're never going to experience the closeness of the love of Jesus if you're not willing to step out and step into the things that he's calling you to do. So maybe you're here and you're like, you're not a Christian. You're like, I haven't signed up for this. Well, let me ask you this. What bucket are you drinking from? Because the well and the water that Jesus is offering us, what it does for us through the offer of salvation, through eternal life, if you want to experience true joy, true peace, true satisfaction, if you want the freedom of the things of this world, then you've got to make sure you're drinking from the right well. So my question is, why don't you try a different well? If you're here this morning and you're not feeling that, maybe it's time for you to try a different well. But here's the thing. Let me wrap up with this. The question you have to ask yourself, what's your thing? What's your thing? What's your baggage that you're trying to hold from God? What's the thing that you're trying to keep tucked away in the darkness? Because Jesus wants to know you, but not just part of you. He wants to know all of you. So will you stop trying to fight in the darkness by yourself? Will you take that thing and drag it out of the darkness and into the light? Because when you do that, Jesus is right there waiting to fight that thing on your behalf. And all you got to do is sit back and watch him reign victorious over that thing. But you can't do that in the dark. It has to be done in the light.